All right, here we go. And we are live. Welcome to the Listen to This Bull live show. Today's a special show. It's on a wrong day for one thing. We normally do this on Tuesdays, but we are at the American Policyholder Association Summit. This is a summit of fraud fighters, insurer fraud, to be very specific. And we're going to talk about the biggest bullshit that you have ever dealt with on a claim. I've got a lot of different guests that are going to come in. Right now, I got Caden Tinklingberg with me, and he's going to tell us a story in just a minute. But if you've never seen this show before, you should be aware that this show is driven by the audience members. Anybody that is watching this has the ability to write a comment wherever it is that you're watching this at, and we will answer whatever questions you have. So if you have anything to add to this, some questions to ask our guests or myself, feel free to put it in there. We'll ask whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. So all I have to do is hit this button and we'll get started. Okay, Caden.
Matthew.
Have I had you on the show before?
No.
I'm an asshole. This is Caden Tinklingberg. It's a really good friend of mine. And whenever I go to conferences in the industry, I end up hanging out with you and Megan at some point, usually over nachos of some kind, because that's Megan. If you know Megan O'Shea with the APA, you know that nachos are necessary.
Yes.
So I know you do a lot of different things. So what do you want to tell people you do?
Well, predominantly, I'm a public adjuster. I am a partner at Swift Public Adjusters. We're a Midwest-based firm.
Just in case the mic sucks,
yeah,
let's talk loud.
Okay. Swift Public Adjusters is the name of my firm. We're based out of the Midwest, licensed in a dozen or so states. And I'm also a real estate investor. So I buy properties, predominantly properties that have been affected by some sort of loss, whether it be a pipe burst claim or a fire or even hail in some cases. So that's predominantly what I do. I do a little bit of construction and construction sales as well. But
do you buy the houses while there's an open claim on them?
Yeah, yep. That's exactly what
and the deal closes while the claim is still open.
Correct.
Yeah. Huh. That's different than what others have taught in this industry. Others that may have waited over a year to actually close on something and just left people in limbo that they were buying a property from. That doesn't really make any sense to do it that way. I like your route better. We'll talk about that on a different episode where I actually have you on.
Involves a little more risk, but I think it's better definitely for the sellers, at least in most cases.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, that's the benefit if you can actually. Different episode. We're not going down that path. We're not doing it. All right. Yeah. So this is the biggest bullshit episode.
Right.
You've dealt with a lot of claims. And you're a smart guy, so you can see the bullshit coming.
They still surprise me sometimes.
All right. Well, tell me a story.
Yeah. So I thought a lot about different scenarios that I've seen with a lot of bullshit. And, we always face a lot of technical bullshit. This is hail. This isn't hail. This is excluded. This isn't excluded. Just gross misrepresentations of the policy. But I thought it would be best for this episode to talk more about a personal how the claim was handled, where it actually caused a lot of pain and strife physically to the policyholder. And so
physical pain.
Yeah, physical pain. Yep. Torture. Emotional pain.
Oh.
Yeah, all the pain.
All right.
So for those of you who aren't aware, in 2020, a derecho impacted the state of Iowa.
Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, derecho. Yep. Not derecha, not derecho.
Derecho.
No, derecho.
Derecho.
Not derecho. No, there's no E before the
Unless you actually live out in Iowa, no one knows how to pronounce it.
Well, it's Spanish, so.
That would explain it.
Yeah. Anyways.
Anyway.
The derecho was, for those who don't know what a derecho is, it's essentially an inland hurricane, but with straight line winds. So a large thunderstorm system tracks across a large geographic area, bringing with it severe winds, lots of rain, sometimes hail, but predominantly just very high-speed winds over a long duration. And so in 2020, this derecho swept across Iowa. The big city that was impacted was Cedar Rapids, and it was the most devastating thunderstorm on record in the entire U.S. was this August 10 derecho. Yeah, so it caused a lot of damage. Took out, I believe, around a third of the tree canopy in the city of Cedar Rapids. And so a lot of trees were coming down. And when trees come down, the roots also come up. And when those roots are around plumbing features like main sewer drain lines, it can create backups. And that's the premise of the damage that occurred on this client of mine.
So the roots damaged plumbing, which caused a overflow, or did it cause a backup?
We're not exactly sure if it was an overflow or backup.
Okay.
In this case, it was covered under the policy, or at least coverage was open for it.
Okay.
And to get into the actual bullshit that we saw was this insured client of ours, which we actually took on a pro bono basis because of how bad we felt for her.
Mm-hmm.
She had sewage or drain water, storm water, because there was a lot of rain that came with it as well. A lot of questionable source water back up into her basement.
Okay.
Yep. And so she had, she's a single mom, and she ran a daycare. That is how she, made her living, was running a daycare. And most of that daycare was based in her basement. Along with the derecho, after all the trees came down and took out all the power lines, the city of Cedar Rapids most of Cedar Rapids was without power for around 2 weeks. It was a really long time without power, and it was in the middle of August, so the weather was hot. So you put those ingredients together, and you get a pretty nasty scenario with microbial proliferation of contaminated materials, wet and hot, no power.
Wet and hot.
Wet and hot. Hot and wet.
That was my college years.
Different episode.
Very different.
Different episode. But anyway, so in this case, this client of ours, this is before our involvement, she knew that she needed to do something. And so she hired a contractor. Contractor came in, and the contractor wanted to remove all of the carpet, the floor coverings, the bottom 2 to 4 feet of drywall, anything that was contaminated by the water.
Okay.
However, my client's insurance company, I don't know, can we name the insurance company on this podcast?
Listen to this bull show. Nobody ever watches it, so it's fine.
So Allstate was the insurer in this case. They instructed her and the contractor that they could not do any destructive mitigation. So no tear out, no disposal. And they made that very clear.
Did they give a reason?
Not that I presently recall. I think they thought it could just be cleaned. I think they thought all the materials could be cleaned.
Right. So a derecho?
Yeah, gosh. Derecho. I don't
know why that's
so hard.
It is. It could be anything we want it to be. You could say tomato, completely different in different parts of the country. So it's fine. The derecho.
Who actually says tomato?
Right. Sometimes. Especially if I'm in an argument about the pronunciation of tomato.
Okay, fine.
So if a derecho, almost called a derecho because of tomato.
I feel like I need to write it out.
Maybe we do
for you.
If that is a inland hurricane in the IICRC, hurricane water, or maybe it's storm water, you probably know better, is considered Cat 3 because it's being picked up from different sources and traveling. So even if it wasn't very suspect contaminated groundwater, I think any water that is related to a storm like that would end up being Cat 3 automatically, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't think they were really refuting the source of the water or the degree of contamination.
Yeah. They just didn't want you to actually gain access to the shit to remove it from the property by destructive mitigation.
Right. Yeah, they didn't want to pay for carpets. They thought it could be cleaned. They didn't want to pay for drywall. They thought it could dry.
Carpet is very expensive,
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, imagine if Allstate paid for all the carpets that they owe for, what would happen to them?
Well, we probably wouldn't talk
Nobody
about
ever
them on
thinks
this
about the
podcast.
insurance carrier's plight. That's what I'm trying to say.
Jeez. Yeah, poor guys. But so anyways, you can guess what happened. The basement turned into a science experiment.
Did the insured end up getting sick?
They did. She did.
Because you said that there was physical pain.
I'm glad you could connect those dots for me.
I did. I'm very good at this.
So obviously her business had to shut down. Her
I thought this was a
daycare.
house.
It is
Oh,
a
she was
house.
running a daycare out of it.
Yep.
Was
Yep.
that disclosed?
I don't know.
Okay, because that could ruin coverages.
It could,
Yeah.
right? Kyle, what are you two doing in the same place?
Mr. Burns.
Hiding from you. See, if Kyle was here, there'd be way too much beard on the screen.
Yeah.
Have you seen that guy's beard? It's like
it's huge.
Down to here.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but size doesn't matter.
Right.
So it's fine. Okay. That's why you're okay. So policyholder ends up getting sick. What was the resolution? Did it end, or did policyholder give up?
We were involved in this case for a few months, and over that time, more than a dozen all-state adjusters got involved at one point in time or another. Mm-hmm. And eventually, we knew that it just had to go to an attorney. And so, a local attorney, heard this gal's story, decided to get involved, and from that point on, since we were on a pro bono basis, we kind of released all of our interest and involvement in that claim, turned over our file and our notes, and it settled for an undisclosed amount. But whatever that amount was, she probably should have gotten 10 times that, because it was bad. Like, she could not talk for months, just had no voice because her whole respiratory tract
to prove
demolished.
That there's a correlation between that and getting ill or sick. So that's a rough thing. That sounds like some bullshit.
It was hard to watch. It was hard to be a part of.
Did they not offer ALE benefits at all?
I think they did, but then didn't.
Did they end up?
They offered them,
capping it and saying you're going back into the house.
Something similar to that.
Yeah.
They didn't want to pay for the furniture. I remember that. So they made her go and take her own furniture out, which was contaminated and caused another flare up.
Maybe it was all wood and sealed. Or was it like cushy couches because it's a woman?
It's like the couch. Yeah, the chairs were sitting.
Porous materials.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, of course it was.
It was bad. Every time you thought she was going to catch a break.
Maybe even her own bed.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible. I've had a similar situation where a policyholder had their ceiling caved in, all the pink insulation came in. Policyholder had respiratory issues, and it was blown in insulation, and the little fiberglass fibers all over the place.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Breathing it in, and he ended up in the hospital. 2 days after the adjuster came through, told him he was going to cover the damage, and did not say a word about being able to go somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know.
I feel like that's a requirement in most states that
they
disclose the benefits that
are pertinent. But is it the field adjuster, the IA's requirement to do that, or the desk adjuster's requirement to do that?
I would say probably both.
Whoever the representative is, the insurer in some way is supposed to notify them of this, but maybe they did by providing a policy. I don't know. It's bullshit when you think about it. If the guy had just said something at any point in time saying, "Hey, this looks terrible. You should probably get in a hotel, at least a hotel." And that's not even really the best situation. But it was right after a hurricane. Everybody and their brother was getting ALE benefits too. Anyway, the guy ended up dying.
What? Really?
Really?
Jeez.
So it can be a problem. That does sound like some serious bullshit. If you were to go back, where was the point where they went wrong? Was it specifically the lack of paying for destructive mitigation?
I think it was before that. I mean, Allstate was not prepared for this level of event. I mean, they're a huge carrier, but none of the carriers were prepared, and I think that created a situation, maybe intentionally, maybe negligently, where the adjusters that were handling these claims, these files, had no idea how to actually properly adjust the claim and know what was necessary. And that resulted in that decision being made that no destructive mitigation could take place, and everything went down the hill from there. So that's definitely the linchpin was that decision, but I think there were factors predating that.
Well, I have some interesting questions that we're not going to bring up because then you will be the only guy on the show today.
Yeah.
But we could definitely jump into these things down the road when I actually have you on. So we'll talk about those things later. Caden, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Matt.
You may go back to learning all that you can from the American Policyholder Association.
I will enjoy it.
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, we're supposed to shake hands like we're not going to see each other the rest of the day. At the end of this, right? I got it.
Hug then.
Right. Thank you so much. So good to see you again. Who did I have next? I've got Hunter Klein coming on with Green, Klein, Wood, and Jones. I didn't know about the Ann Jones part until today, but apparently they've pulled in another partner.
Yeah, we looped somebody else in. You know,
Yeah.
we're chicken catchers, chicken fryers. Matt, good
How's
to
it
see
going,
you.
Hunter?
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I don't often get another attorney to talk about bullshit from an insurance claim, but
Right.
John Wood says you have amazing stories.
There are several. They run the gamut. And John was asking me, what's the best bullshit you've seen from a carrier? And every claim has a level of bullshit.
There is.
But I think that one of my favorite stories about absolute bullshit from a carrier, we represented the Green Earth Wellness Center in Colorado Springs. They were a medicinal marijuana grow facility and dispensary just on the cusp of legalization in Colorado.
Wow.
So they purchased, and it says it on the deck page, a medical marijuana insurance policy. Everybody knew this was a marijuana insurance policy. Well, the Waldo Canyon fire happens. Smoke, because the way that the grow facility was situated, smoke came in, literally damaged the pot plants, and they filed a claim. The insurance company denied it, arguing it was contraband, saying, well, it's legal under state law, but illegal under federal law. They removed us to federal court and said, nope, this medical marijuana insurance policy, marijuana is contraband. We don't cover it, which was probably the biggest load of bullshit I've ever seen.
But you almost got to try.
That's the MO. It's like, well, let's see if it sticks.
Yeah.
It did not. We had a great judge. She's the chief judge. She was at the time the chief judge, the federal bench in Colorado. Marcia Krieger, you can look her up. She's a tremendous jurist. And we fought it. We fought the good fight. We got a good ruling. We won. But that is probably one of the best examples of just pure insurance company bullshit.
So I can picture the defense counsel's little meeting before they decided to take this thing on. And they were thinking, man, these guys are probably high as hell. They're probably not going to be much fighters of anything. They're just like, oh, man, bummer. And that'll be the end of it. That's probably how that
I think it
meeting
is. I think my favorite part of the case, not only the bullshitness of the medical marijuana insurance policy not insuring marijuana, but we had to prove up the value of the plants. So we hired a gentleman who is a marijuana expert, ponytail down to the small of his back. And I'm in open court, federal court in Colorado, discussing with a very august body the value of purple nurple, Bob Gnarly, Bubba Kush, things like this. And at one point, so I'd researched this guy and I discovered he was a Bigfoot hunter. You know what a Bigfoot hunter is?
I've seen a show about that.
Yeah, he's that guy. He believes
That's the guy.
Different guy, but he's part of this group. He believes that Bigfoot is real. And generally, I feel like that would go against an expert. But in the value of marijuana, I'm like, this just adds to his credibility. So on the stand in open court, I asked him, Mr. Hanson, I have to ask you, do you believe Bigfoot is real, sir? Yes, I do. Judge, who is more qualified to talk about weed than this guy? That was probably the
CWX.
Oh, there's a transcript of
Is
me.
there a strain called Bigfoot?
Not at this facility. There probably is now, but our facility didn't carry it.
Because then it would definitely exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. It was a fun one.
Did the judge laugh?
The judge, no, she was, again, brilliant jurist. You had no idea what she was thinking. But I'm sure after the fact, she walked back into her chambers and just died laughing, because how often does that happen in federal court in a non-criminal context?
This was in front of a jury?
No, this was not in front of the jury. This was
Okay.
just in front of the judge. No,
Just the judge.
we won the ruling about coverage, and they settled before it went to a jury. Unfortunately, I was looking forward to trying it, but
Did they depose your expert?
no,
guy?
he did very well in the challenge, and they said,
Yeah.
no, we'll just pay it.
Wow. That's really funny.
Yeah, that was a good one. There was another one where, carrier bullshit, not as fun as the marijuana, but it was disappointing. And it's one of the reasons why I love calling carriers on their bullshit. It was an Allstate claim. It was after a hailstorm in San Antonio. And this is a Gold Star family, single mom, lost her husband, veteran to the Iraq War. And she had a claim with Allstate. She didn't realize her roof was damaged, filed a claim a year late. The Allstate adjuster says, well, your policy has a year reporting requirement. You didn't report it in a year, denied. So she calls us. I get a copy of her policy. Guess what wasn't in it? A 1-year reporting requirement. And so they just bullshitted this woman to say, nope, no coverage, no claim, whatever. And it was based solely on a lie.
I've seen a lot of prompt notice defenses coming out of just about any claim. It wasn't filed on that day. They're trying to state that there is a prompt notice issue.
Right.
In everything, in their reservation of rights, in their denial letters, it could be 2 weeks later. And it doesn't even say immediately in those policies. It says prompt or something along those lines, or notify us as soon as possible.
Right.
Even. And they still go down that road. What is up with that?
So it depends on the state pretty heavily. In Texas, what you always want to consider is whether your state follows what's called the notice prejudice rule. And that rule says that in order for an insurance company to deny coverage based on late notice, they must show that late notice somehow prejudiced their ability to adjust the claim.
Sure.
And so in Texas, the burden of proof is on the insurance company. So in Texas, the late notice defense really isn't all that solid, because they have to prove the late notice prejudiced them. And that's very difficult to do. Florida, where we're also licensed, is the opposite. So they have the notice prejudice rule, but the burden is on the insured to prove there was no prejudice, which is more of a difficult burden to carry. Then compare that to Colorado, which has no notice prejudice rule. Late notice in and of itself is sufficient to deny coverage. So it really depends on your state, but most states do adopt Texas version of the notice prejudice requirement, so that defense really doesn't carry much water.
And even in those states, there has been at least some case law, or maybe cases that are they hold some weight, but they're not case law. They are brain fart.
Dicta, they are not.
I don't know.
Who knows?
You would know. The audience knows that I'm trying to say that they are. I thought I was going to have it that time. I did not. Persuasive.
Persuasive authority.
Persuasive.
Yes,
So,
there is some persuasive authority on.
but most states have some kind of ruling, at least for hail and wind claims, to say that it's 1 year or 2 years or 3 years from the date of loss is still prompt notice.
Generally speaking, yes, and also depends upon when you discovered it, how you discovered it, things
Sure.
like that. The discovery rule, which gets bandied about in a lot of things, usually improperly, but this is one context where it would potentially apply.
Yeah. Notice prejudice rule. So I haven't found that they have been very successful in having this defense, but they're putting it into all these letters, probably preparing themselves just in case they could use that defense down the road. And that's why it's in a reservation of rights or something along those lines. If you get a letter like that and you filed a claim 2 weeks prior, as long as you haven't thrown away all the evidence, you're probably going to be fine.
No, it's true. And a lot of times they'll do it because if they don't put it in the reservation of rights, they've waived that potential defense. Even though it doesn't carry any water, they'll put it in there. So a lot of people get freaked out when they see it. There's no reason to panic.
But what if they say in the same letter, this does not waive our rights to other defenses that we may bring up down the road?
That also depends on your state. Some states that doesn't preserve any other defense. Some states it does. Texas it would. But when you get to litigation, they have to allege in their answer any defense they want to bring, policy or otherwise. If they fail to do so, that defense is gone. It doesn't exist. So they have to be very careful with, in particular, federal court, how they plead their answer and what defenses they rely upon. Because keep in mind, insurance companies bear the burden to prove any exclusion or exception to coverage. So if they're trying to argue there's no coverage for a loss, that burden is theirs. They have to plead it with particularity. High
Now,
on nerd.
if new information is brought out, though, they could then bring out new defenses that are tied to the new information if that information was prejudicing them from their previous defense.
In a claim context, possibly. In a litigation context, probably not, because of the disclosure requirements. There isn't
Okay.
really, when a case gets to litigation, there shouldn't be new information. And even if they're like, oh, we had no idea, well, but you should have known with any reasonable level of diligence that this was going to be an issue. We had a case recently where, literally on the cusp of trial, the insurance company tried to amend their answer to allege a counterclaim for fraud, saying
In the middle of trial.
before trial, but after discovery period ended, and we represented a school. They tried to allege the school committed fraud, and we said, wait a second.
I mean, you've seen the level of education these days.
Exactly. So they tried to argue this, and we told the judge, they're basing this on information they would have had years ago, and are now just trying to say, oh, well, it's clearly fraud. The judge is like, no, you knew this information, you didn't act on it, you can't hide behind the log. So there's a level of where that can happen, but for the most part in litigation, you can't really do that, especially in federal court.
That's to a new level. Blows my mind, all these church mutuals and other claims having so many issues, and they represent churches.
No, they do.
You think, at least for them, or for schools, or for the, it's bullshit. That's all it is. So
Well, I've got one other good bullshit story for you. This was a case that we tried in Colorado. It was after the Waldo Canyon fire against USAA, of all people. And USAA brings in their national trial counsel. He's the he's the president of Colorado Bar, so I'm not going to speak too ill about him, but very, very suave, smarmy individual. And I had been warned. So the judge we were in front of was the late Richard Mach, who was the presiding judge over the Timothy McVeigh trials. Very revered jurist, very well respected. And I met him once before this case and was given the advice by a clerk, do not wear pink in front of him. He does not like pink. So I told him,
sets him off.
It does.
So like a bull with red.
Apparently so. So I warned my partners at the time, because I was a baby lawyer. I'm like, don't wear pink, whatever you do, because my partner Bob would always wear pink. I'm like, don't wear pink. So we don't. But opposing counsel shows up with his pink tie, pink pocket square, and alligator shoes. They weren't pink. But he gives his opening statement. And in his opening statement, representing USAA, well, in USAA, we don't have policyholders. We have members. And you're a member of our company. And we, all this bullshit waxing so poetically about members. And at the end of it, I'll never forget this. The judge looks at the jury, because in federal court, judges can do this. Looks at the jury from the bench, sua sponte, which means on his own, and says, you heard everything that guy just said. They're still an insurance company. And at that point, I'm like, well, this is going to go okay.
Oh my God. You could never represent Owens Corning to that judge.
No, you could not.
There would be some problems. That is really interesting. Is that a form of segregation?
Given that we were on the right end of it, I'm going to say no.
Obviously not.
But possibly.
Definitely not. Who knows? Thank you so much for being on.
Matt, it was a pleasure.
Those are
Absolute
great
pleasure.
stories.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. I'll try to get you to come on and have a full show soon enough.
I'd love to. I can nerd out on.
I like nerding. Stuff. I'm a nerd. George, you're up. How you doing?
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. So I got George. I can't pronounce your last name. Quintero. I said it wrong. I know.
You said it right. You said it right.
Quintero. I was trying to say derecho earlier, and I had a problem with that. So people have to bear with me. I'm white as hell. George is a PA in South Florida, but he was an IA in South Florida. And before that, he was a fireman in South Florida.
Yes.
And so you've seen a lot. We're going to switch gears here and talk about bullshit that you've seen from the IA's perspective.
Well, I'll give you a little bit more. I was IA and company. Because remember,
you were staff adjuster at some point too.
I was a senior adjuster with Liberty Mutual.
Oh yeah. Okay.
The southernmost adjuster, I would imagine, in the state of Florida.
Might have been.
But I've seen a lot in the last 2 decades. When I got into this, yes, I was a fireman. I learned a lot. I grew up around construction. I became an accidental adjuster. Okay.
By accidents or for accidents?
When the storms hit in 2004, they
Whoops.
needed.
I'm an adjuster now.
I'm an adjuster. It was very difficult before then to become actually even an independent or company adjuster, because we had a really long time span between storms.
Yeah.
They were only looking for people with experience. So when those storms hit, there was no adjusters.
Yeah.
So I came in, I had my experience with construction. The fire department helped me a lot. I had been using Xactimate. My in-laws company did a lot of commercial work for companies like Bank of America and whatnot. So I was very familiar with the program. So it was just a good fit. And I hit the ground running, and 20 years goes by pretty fast.
Yeah.
But what do you want to hear? What stories?
You know, we hear, if you don't live in Florida, you might not have heard, but we hear a lot of horror stories from people on the other side that are saying that public adjusters in Florida are all crooks. And a lot of times when you ask them for some specifics, they start to focus in on South Florida PAs almost exclusively. So what's the deal in South Florida? What have you seen that would give South Florida that kind of a reputation?
I think it all stems from understanding that that South Florida and Florida within itself probably is the most aware state of how the insurance industry works.
Oh,
Because of Hurricane Andrew, their experiences of them over time, experiencing or dealing with insurance companies because of Andrew, consumers learned a lot with their homes. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of the older PAs that I met, you know, when I started in the industry, were ex-company, ex-independent adjusters. They were pretty knowledgeable. It did leave a very open door for a lot of individuals that may have not had good ethics or standards. But I think it happened.
It was so easy to get coverage.
It was easy to become an adjuster. It was easy to become an independent and a public adjuster. The floodgates opened.
Okay.
There was a major need. A lot of people don't realize when there's a storm, you're not going to get the most experienced individuals. You know, there's a demand. They try and draw adjusters from all parts of the country.
Yeah. Like locusts.
Yeah, like locusts.
Yeah.
I mean, I met guys that were, you know, auto body guys now doing property, never stood on a roof in their life.
Yeah.
You know, and they just needed somebody out there to adjust claims for them. And back when I started back then in the early 2000s, you had initial payments going out, and then kind of like the more detailed adjustment would come on later on.
Sure.
Those guys would wash out, transfer to another adjuster that had more experience, and over time things got settled out.
That still happens.
That still happens.
It's probably even worse now. But anyway, keep going.
Well, I think we've gone away from that. I mean, we spoke a little bit earlier. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. I can tell you a lot about.
I want to hear about the floors more than anything else. Because that's the example that we get every single time is dropped objects.
Dropped objects? Well, I mean, dropped objects went away.
Maybe dropped objects with more than terminal velocity behind them for some reason.
Okay. Here was the problem. And I remember this being, and I worked for the insurance companies when these claims were made. I wasn't a public adjuster yet. I got a lot of experience very fast because of the volume of work that I was given. I got to work for the state insurer. I got to do work for FIGA, other carriers. I got to see how they operated from the inside. We did have a TPA authority, which is third-party authority, which means you have, at least when I was with them, I had the authority to make a coverage determination on the claim and issue payments. And what winds up happening is the burden or the entire adjustment process goes on to that independent adjuster. And we got away from all that nowadays. But going back to the dropped objects question you're saying and what was going on, it was in the policy. It was an all perils policy, kind of like what we were talking before. Everything is covered unless it's excluded. Now, the only way as an adjuster for an insurance company that I could ever deny a claim like that if I could prove it was intentional. You know, so for the most part, I go back and they'd have these meetings, and I remember going to a brainstorming meeting and I'm like, well, you guys cover it. What are you going to do? I mean, unless I catch somebody in the act of doing something, I can't say
Right.
they did it intentionally or not. I mean, sometimes it was very questionable, like the wine bottle falling down and you had multiple impacts on the tile floor or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Oh,
But
it was a very drunk wine bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
dancing around.
it was very lucrative though.
Yeah.
I mean, you had one broken tile and you wound up, paying 50, 60, $70,000.
I mean, you almost
claim.
never have the ability to actually repair something like that without causing additional damage, or if you get lucky enough that they have one of those tiles sitting around. They never have those tiles with those floor damages, do they?
Well, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do, but they usually don't match because the sun will
Oh,
affect
yeah.
it, or it's a different lot number or
Or
whatnot. But
the
the match,
wine saturated the existing
well,
tiles.
there you go. Well, let me tell you, you met some very interesting individuals doing some of those claims. I
Yeah.
remember a PA once, and I got a chuckle out of it because I thought it was probably the best answer I've ever heard. From a public adjuster on a dropped object claim, and it happened to be there was chip marks everywhere around this, throughout the entire house on this floor. And I'm like, so which one was the one that that was damaged by the dropped wine bottle or whatever it was? And he goes, well, you see it was this one, this one right over here. And I'm like, well, he's got about all these other ones over here, when you say that, were those, no, but you know what? This is the one that pisses him off the most. I got a good laugh out of that when I walked out of the house.
If you had that today, they would say that, well, the existing condition of the floor is to have a bunch of broken areas like that. So there really is no indemnification needed.
Well,
That's how I picture it going down.
I mean,
it's still
they
bullshit.
They tell you a lot nowadays. So
Yeah, they do. They do. So you were in the fire department. You probably had a lot of fire claims as an IA. Do you handle a lot of fire now as a PA?
now and then I
Yeah.
do fires. I mean, it's not something I focus on. I get a lot of work from word of mouth. A lot of
Yeah.
people refer me, clients, people that I've done work with. But I handled a lot of fires for the insurance carrier just because of my background. They used to give them all to me, so I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And fire is very interesting, and not just because I was a firefighter, but there's very predictable behavior patterns. When something's too hot, too even, it doesn't look natural. Fire doesn't burn that way.
Huh.
Understanding how the fire department goes ahead, how they go into a home, how they, we were talking a little bit earlier about positive pressure ventilation. How that blows smoke throughout the house.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that. I think it's missed a lot. Also how the heat affects drywall. A lot of times companies will come in, oh yeah, we can just paint over it. I'm like, no, that doesn't quite work like that. Let me go through here. But at the end of the day, I mean, as a public adjuster, even as an adjuster for an insurance company, you want to be aware of what's going on. It's constantly evolving and field that, you learn a lot. And as technology and things advance, I see things so different now than when I first started that it's amazing.
There's a lot of new shit.
There's a lot of new
There's a lot of new tools you can use to prove a lot of stuff
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So
Oh,
if you can prove it better now than you could before, you have to prove it more.
You have to prove it more. If I'm giving advice to adjusters for homeowners and adjusters taking care of homeowner claims, it is your responsibility to show that burden of proof. The
Right.
more documentation, files have to be so accurate nowadays. It was funny. I was having a conversation with another adjuster the other day, and it's 5 times the work for the same result. You know, and it's skimming through those engineering reports we were talking about earlier, making
I do a
sure
lot
there's
of them.
inconsistencies and whatnot. So
There's always something fun in those. It's probably my favorite thing to do actually is the engineer reports because they just make me laugh.
Well, I had one
Yeah.
that was interesting. I'll tell you a BS story.
Yeah, that's what we're here
92-year-old client, home in Miami Beach, real nice old guy. Tenant vacates the property. He says, hey, look, I found these damages. Can you please go and look at my house?
Mhm.
Citizens at the time, Citizens Property Insurance, the state insurer, has the MRP, Managed Repair Program, and Emergency Water
Yeah.
Services Program, or
Yeah,
EWRS
the
program.
optional stuff that gives them additional coverages or at least removes limitations, all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
So what I do is I've gotten into the habit of video recording the inspections. So,
In Florida?
In Florida, yeah. I mean, we're able to do it now. The upper courts found that the only one who has a reasonable right to expectation of privacy is the homeowner in their own home. That if the insurance company doesn't like it, too bad, tough. A judge ruled on it. So
No kidding.
whether they don't, yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So they hate it. It's funny, the videos I get, you'll see engineers covering their head and driving away. Somehow they get a diesel Jetta to peel out, and it looks really sketchy. But in my mind, I'm always thinking, my God, what aren't they willing to say on camera? What are they going to say off camera that they're not willing to say on camera? If you're being recorded, I get it. It may be a little uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
do your job, do it right, take your time, ask the questions you need to ask. But yeah, they don't like being video recorded. I found that to help my clients, it helps a lot with documenting everything that happens. And in this case in particular, I told them, send out your water mitigation company. My client wants you to provide the services. So the next day I meet out at the property. Water mitigation company pulls up. Well, I think it is. It looked like a lawn service trailer. Has some
Really?
lawnmower equipment in the back.
That's interesting.
And yeah, and blowers and whatnot. And
They use the grass to absorb the water.
yeah, well, they came in and I go,
It's
well,
natural.
do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, you're landscaping and water mitigation. All right,
Why
no
not?
problem. You work for the state insurer.
Yeah, I mean, carpet cleaners for mitigation companies a lot. So.
Well, this
What's the
guy
difference?
came in and he's like, well, what are you going to do? He goes, well, what I see is I got to cut the wall 2 feet up.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, you do what you got to do. So this guy takes, he starts cutting out the wall, tears out everything. I'm going like this. I can't believe this is going on. Basically no work authorization, nothing, but by the homeowner. Does it this thing, I document it.
I'm not a big fan of those work authorizations anyway. I don't think they're actual contracts, but anyway,
he leaves.
Yeah.
Adjuster comes out, they tear out the base tile. It was matching to the floor. There's hollow tile all over the floor. He says, I'm going to send out an engineer. Okay. They sent out this engineer. Engineer comes back. Oh, the insurance company was prejudiced because their water mitigation company, the insured's water mitigation company, tore out the cabinets and the wall, which was evidence that I would have needed to make a determination. But then in the conclusions, but I've determined that this is long-term.
Of course it is. How did they make that determination exactly? Yeah, without any evidence. Did the engineer actually use the word prejudice?
Yeah.
The engineer said that in their report.
They're mirroring, mind you, having the adjusting background, I realized, and I saw this quite a bit when I work with the carriers, they're mirroring policy language in their
but using it wrong.
Non-biased expert reports.
They do this. Yeah.
I mean, we have an expert, a constant plumbing expert that, I hope he's not watching this right now, but he puts on the bottom of every page as the footer, this report has been prepared with the anticipation of litigation.
Just so it
in
can be
anticipation
of oh my, it can be privileged.
So we love
That's
it.
crap.
We love it because when we show them, there was no determination this time. Why are you anticipating it's going to go to litigation? But you can see where these, the industry has gone.
I'm looking at that through a lens of being in a low leverage state where shit like that is going to just cause problems with the policyholder that doesn't really have any protections whatsoever. So, we don't have mediation or even appraisal in Georgia, for example. So it's something like that would protect the insurance company from even having to provide a copy of that report, potentially. And that's the point of it. And there are several states now that actually have codified that the insurance company, upon request, is supposed to provide all of those documents, even though it's obvious that they should anyway. The policyholders have a right to this anyway, but they've had to codify it in some states just to force the carriers to do it. But they don't have to do it in those codes, they don't have to do it if it's privileged information or considered work product. And it's privileged if it was produced in anticipation of litigation. So that's some bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see that report.
Oh, I'll get you a copy of it. I'll redact the names on it.
Yeah, that'd be
I mean,
great.
I have another interesting one that I'm going through right now.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen the shrink wraps on the roofs.
Yeah.
So insured has a windstorm claim. Invite the carrier out. They have a chance. They get on the roof and they inspect the roof. The adjuster inspects the roof. They shrink wrap the roof. Adjuster comes back a few weeks later. Well, I think we're going to send an engineer out now.
Engineer doesn't open it up. They just look.
No, get this. Engineer calls me up and he goes, "Hey, who's going to take this shrink wrap off the roof?" Well, I don't have the capabilities of doing it, or neither does my client. But I'm going to provide you the phone number of the company that did it. You can arrange it with them because it's not one of those that you have to take the entire wrap off. They can actually peel it like a banana and then seam it.
And seam it back.
So it's just a few hours of them doing it. And the insurance adjuster reaches out to me. She says, "Well, I'm not going to pay for that. Either you or the insured's going to have to take that off, or somebody's going to take it off so we can inspect the roof because we have a right to access." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So my client, which already allowed you an inspection on the roof, has to pay, is meeting their post-loss obligations to protect their property from further damages.
Yeah.
Has to now incur an expense for you to do your investigation on the claim. Why don't you come out here with the engineer? "Oh no, we're not going to do that. Either you take it off, or they send a reservation of rights letter with a non-cooperation letter. Hey, listen, we're providing you access. Here's a number. We're not going to remove this ourselves. First, we don't have the tools or capability of doing it."
To be fair, though, there are policies that would not pay for any emergency services if it was deemed that there wasn't a covered loss that you're doing the emergency services for. So maybe potentially they were saying that, thinking that there wasn't a covered loss at all. I mean, that's why they were sending out the engineer to make sure that it wasn't a covered loss. So maybe they were saying they're not going to pay for that. They're not going to pay for the emergency services as a whole. But was it their company that went out and put that on?
No, the insured bought it out.
Okay.
But they weren't being told to pay for they were just being told to pay for the people to go out there and do it.
Right.
My client doesn't have the equipment to
Of
do
course.
that, or neither do we.
I mean,
But
everybody has knives.
let me tell you what happened. What ended up happening, they sent out the engineer. Well, but like you say, I'm going to give you the phone number of these people. You can coordinate with them. If you want to pay them, I think they were charging like $800 to go out there and open it for them. Pretty reasonable to go out there and have some guys
Depending
standing
on the
by.
size, yeah.
And they didn't call him. Engineer goes out, provides a report, states that the roof wasn't damaged by the storm.
How did he make that determination?
You tell me, Matthew.
I don't know.
Looking from the damages from the ground
Yeah.
and
Well,
from the
clearly,
interior. This is a long-term
I mean, he's an
issue.
engineer. We all know that engineers are the smartest people alive. They have built toilets on space shuttles. They can do anything. They get all the women. They are so smart that they could figure out, using the scientific method, somehow within probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
20, 30 minutes. The video.
Exactly what was going on under that thing without even having to remove. Clearly, they can do that kind of a thing.
You should have like a bullshit meter.
I should. I just have like a pinging right now.
We'll squeeze it. The higher it goes.
That's a great idea.
But those are the kind of things going on down there. A very aggressive stance. You ask about South Florida. It seems like every public adjuster I speak to, and I mean, I know guys who work for insurance companies are very ethical. There's good and bad in the industry. But they take a very hard line stance. It's almost like they're trying to punish the insured for trying to get some kind of representation. It seems like it sometimes.
Yeah.
We have I think we have a company, one of the insurance companies, when we deposed the adjuster, that we got them on record stating that when a public adjuster handles the claim, they treat the claim differently. They don't. They're not the ones. So they do treat people different.
They do. They do. I have a recording from a undisclosed insurance carrier in Georgia. This is a sealed thing, so I can't actually name them. But I have a audio recording where they talked to policyholder and told the policyholder that if they were to hire a public adjuster, that they were going to drop them. And
There
that
you go.
they've done it many times in the past.
Think about that. Somebody that represents you.
It was the president of this insurance company.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Filed a complaint with the DOI. And
Did it get anywhere?
it was closed immediately.
Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair to the DOI, it was potentially because there was an attorney involved. So there was potential litigation. I know the DOI doesn't want to get involved in anything along those lines if it's already into that role. So I think they closed it because they had assumed it was going to be taken care of through some kind of dispute resolution process. I assume, but we don't have any access to any information on that because it's sealed. So it is what it is.
You see that a lot.
Yeah.
You know where you can get a little bit of that with appraisal.
Yeah.
I've used appraisals aren't technically sealed, the awards, and I actually had a case where with that same insurance company I was talking about, where their engineer said it didn't happen at one house and the house next door that I know I was representing that insured as well. They did, and they paid one and they didn't the other, and somehow the storm skipped that house.
Storms are very, very
Tricky.
negligent
Tricky,
that way
tricky.
sometimes. Tricky.
But
Tricky
yeah.
storms. They're not straight line winds like a derecho is, according to Caden. So, anyway, George, thank you for being on. Appreciate
Matt,
the
thank you for
stories.
having me. I'm looking forward to being on the show again.
Yeah, we're gonna pull you
And
on for a full show.
do
We'll
a-
talk about fire.
All right, I'll get ready for that one.
Get into all that fun stuff along there. All right, I got Clerk Brown coming in to wrap things up with us. If you guys know who Clerk Brown is, he comes from the restoration world. One of the original guys doing Facebook groups that have been beneficial, and now you run Restoration Nation. Yep. So
Another Facebook group, our 2.0 version of an earlier rendition. So
right,
it's the 2.0 is always better.
the friendlier version.
The friendlier, more supportive of the mission we're trying to do here.
I think that's a great
Thanks
word.
for having me on.
Yeah. So we don't get a lot of in this show because of my own background. We talk about roofs a lot.
Yeah.
We don't get into the restoration side. If we do, it's usually mitigation. We almost never talk about remediation or something along those lines. So do you have any bullshit stories involving those?
Yeah. Wow. Do I? Do we want G-rated?
No.
No,
We
okay.
say fuck.
No. Okay. I can just go and get out of the way.
Yeah.
Because I'm completely a Boy Scout here. Man, I could name a bunch. I'm just going to go for a very recent one that really is kind of shocking. I have a client, because I'm now a business consultant, coach, not a consultant, excuse me.
Gotcha.
It's a bad word.
Very different.
A very different word. Mentor, coach. I have a client in New York State, had a claim with a customer. I won't say the name of the carrier, but it rhymes with travelers. Okay. So this particular remediation restoration contractor, you like that? I'll let everybody fill in the gap there. No beep there.
We're getting a photo. Hang on. All right.
This particular contractor is no exactimate, believes it's been weaponized by the insurance industry, which where would he ever get that idea?
The software was weaponized?
The software is weaponized in its fixed pricing and all the illusions of this. But anyway, he uses a blanket invoice for the services he does. There had been a water mitigation. The amount doesn't matter. The services, it was water, a little bit of cleanup, contents or whatever. And he uses a PDF and issues it to the insured. That's how he goes, I work for the insured. I don't do business behind their back. We're running up on 43 days and it's not been paid. And he's, putting some pressure, some friendly pressure, still trying to get the 5-star review, and ask the customer, hey, where are we at with that? And he said, well, I'm glad you called because I got paid less by the carrier than what your invoice was about. Well, Bob said, well, that happens every single time, but what are we talking about? He goes, well, I see here that you negotiated with my carrier for a lesser amount. And he says, no, I did not. and says, well, I've got your invoice here and it's, $1,200 less than what you invoiced me. And he said, can you send that to me? So here's what happened, man. The carrier adjuster, probably not sanctioned by the carrier, took a PDF, got into Adobe, and edited this gentleman's official mailed invoice, which just makes it mail fraud, federal. He had mailed an invoice by
It
paper.
does kind of, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and he had redacted and changed some rates, left the scope the same, and just changed his unit cost on how he charges and paid based off of that. And of course, that went up the ladder to the DOI, and this is in New York State, and they don't
PDFs are, you can track all the revisions and things so easily. The metadata that's built
metadata.
into it is significant. It's hard to get
The
around
question was, he went to DOI and ended up having a conversation with the regional vice president and said, what's the incentive there for this individual adjuster to do that? Is he incentivized to do this? Because they're obviously not told to do that. There's a lot at risk there of his job and his credentials and whatnot, his license. Not even sure he was really an adjuster. He may have been a desk affiliate, associate, claim, whatever they want to. But I heard that today he works at Tim Hortons. So this claims person. So I hope he's doing well. If you get your copy from there,
I mean, he's got a great job now.
That's one, and then one that always sticks with me. I think if we want to talk about the victimization of how homeowners and customers and business owners get caught in between.
Did you ever find out did you ever find out what his motivation was? That was the end of it. They just paid it and you don't know.
It was very quiet to that.
That's
the difference was paid in full based off the original. Hey, let's make this go away for $1,800. And of course, Bob wants to know, but he also uses that in every claim that rhymes with travelers.
Yeah. Every single one.
Let's make sure we're above board on this thing.
Let's not do it that way. I had a very similar situation. It involved mail fraud because I didn't mail anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I was an appraiser on a claim. I don't do a lot of appraisals, so this is rare for me. It's been years. This is an old ass story. Allstate claim at appraisal, and as the appraiser, we ended up getting the umpire involved. No, we didn't. Instead of getting the umpire involved, the opposing appraiser wrote an award and forged my signature on it. I confronted him on it, and he said, I'm not allowed to pay for Atlas Chalet roofs anymore. I'm going to lose my... He started crying on the phone, and he was actually a friend of mine up to that point, which blew my mind.
Right.
Not any longer.
Mm-hmm.
But... he was worried about losing his job if he was going to end up with another award of a full roof replacement on a discontinued material. Anyway,
that's incredible.
I haven't even thought about that in a while.
I've had one more case. I'll shorten it up a little bit. This was in Georgia. A claim. A colleague of mine, he is a remediation restoration contractor, but also does asbestos abatement. Okay. So you're supposed to test for asbestos in any job, any project where you think there'll be destruction or materials
of any material that might have asbestos.
By the way, for those watching and listening, of any age building, it's written in OSHA law that houses built as soon as yesterday still could contain asbestos-containing materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole nother show. I write and talk about that a lot. But
it's a big deal, and it leads to a lot of coverage. And they try to. It is a whole other show, but they try to get into the whole pollution crap, and that's also some bullshit. That would be a great show. We need to do that.
We do that. You're not that. But this contractor, real quick, he tested for asbestos, and the adjuster on point said the house is not old enough. You're wrong for doing it. He says, no, here's the verification, blah, blah. Anyway, the adjuster seemed to feel like he was one up and shown up in front of the carrier for not knowing in front of the customer. It was an elderly couple, and it was a retired attorney, not litigator, but some kind of family law. Mm-hmm. And an older couple, I want to say they were upwards of 80 years old. So the house, the work that had to be done required a pack out. And this adjuster had said, I'm going to get you on this. He's what he told the contractor. Said, you won't get away with it. I'm going to get you back. It was just that, and vindictive. He said, yeah, whatever. Did the pack out, did the work, replaced the floors, and was going to prepare the estimate to take the contents back to the home for the couple. And the adjuster said, I'm not paying for it all to be put back into the rooms. I want you to take it and drop it. for $3,500, just drop it at the front door and don't do the rest of it. The gentleman of the home, 80 years old, picks up every box and starts taking them to the rooms that were labeled. Starts to go down to the basement, finished basement, trips and falls, breaks his hip, dies in the hospital, sepsis. All of his attorney friends of his whole life came back and helped the widow sue the insurance company for limiting coverage that was, by the way, nowhere near the limits, just from a vindictive standpoint.
And very clearly, I mean, they accepted liability. So
yeah, it was a pretty nasty thing, but it really was one of the, I didn't do a lot of residential in my career. I was commercial, but man, when you get into resident, I mean, you affect people's lives.
It's rough sometimes.
Yeah.
I had to pull myself out of that towards the end of my PA career, just because it affects you too much. It
does.
There's a lot of anger that comes with helping homeowners that get screwed over.
Yeah. And then you start carrying that into your other claims, where there may not be yet. So you have to put yourself in check and reset a lot of times for those.
I think for public adjusters and contractors that do that a lot, and they feel that anger, they find it hard to settle claims because they always feel like they have left something on the table that is owed, and it drives them nuts. And it's not that they want the more money. It's just that it's fucking owed and they're supposed to have it. So give it. And they feel like a failure if they don't get everything. So a lot of times, if you get to that point, if you guys are doing this kind of a thing, the easiest thing you can do is to set yourself some parameters. If you've done this, this, and this, whatever those parameters are, that's up to you. Set those parameters. If you've done those things, then you can feel good about either settling or handing the claim off to an attorney. But if you set those parameters, you won't feel like you've not done your job and there's something more that you can do. But they have to be set in advance, where you're always going to feel that way. Take my advice on that. It worked out for us.
Good words for that. And I think communicate with the insured, because they may not be up for more fight.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just ask them, say, are we on the same page to move forward, or have we?
Especially in big losses where they can't be in their home.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of my career was roof related, and it really didn't matter if they were they were in their home most of the time. So
unless you live to the top off,
But the ones where they aren't there, all the water claims we've had, all the fire claims we've had, definitely not nearly as many as you've had, but they want to get back in their house as early as possible. They don't give a shit if it's settled sometimes at 50 cents on the dollar, just to get back into their lives again.
And you know, the carriers know that.
They know it.
They know that. It's built into the process.
Yeah.
I have clients that in Columbus, Ohio, that his average reconstruction from a fire from time of move out to move, or from settlement of the whole claim, is around 11 to 12 months, just because it's better now post COVID, but the lead time for the cabinets was real bad. But he said almost to the day in month 3 or 4, I'll have a homeowner who will contact us furious because of the pace at which things are moving along, which is usually nothing to do with the contractor, usually from an adjuster settlement or even the city ordinance with the codes, the architecture or something like that. Right. He said they'll do, like, can you put plastic on my wall so that I can just move back and live in my house, because my ALE, my rental house, is an hour away and my kids are in soccer and we're spending 3 hours a day on the road, and it really, really weighs on people on how much
get
life
back into their
changed.
lives at all. Now, it definitely disrupts everything. So you can't blame someone for just wanting to give in or to accept whatever it is, even though you always feel like there's just a little bit more that you could do that would solve the whole thing. You have to have those parameters in place. It's really the only way. I've tried so many different things to tell myself when I felt like I've done enough. I never felt like I did enough.
Yeah.
I felt like a failure for Andy.
We're our biggest critics of our own selves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
So, there's the residential claims are just difficult in that way, because there's always these people, they get screwed.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's bullshit.
They're re-victimized over and over again.
They are over and over again. And they're already kind of messed up. Yeah. All right. Clark, tell me what company you're with, since we didn't talk about that a minute ago, and then we're going to wrap this thing up.
I own a pretty small business coaching. We focus on help people run better businesses. While I know restoration front and back, that's usually not where people fail. Obviously, education is it, but a lot of people just don't know how to run a business. So our motto is we try to help people run a better business so they can stay in business longer to help more people, if that's what they're really in the game for. So Restoration Advisors is our coaching group. We coach small to medium-sized restoration contractors. And honestly, my business is just to help me have freedom to do things like the APA, things I love to do. That's what fires me up. I need a business that helps me fund those. I have a podcast as well, which I've invited you to join. It's Disaster Podcaster. We're on season 3. It's fun. Sometimes it's a strike out, and sometimes it's a home run, just on topics, but it's always someone that walks up and says, "God, I love that episode." And I'm like, "God, that was my worst one."
I've had that happen.
You've had that happen.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, I felt like that was my worst work. And
Sometimes
someone said, but that's what someone said. But I needed to hear it at the time I heard it, or I had an idea that launched into something else. But I'm just really involved in the education of the industry, especially my side. We're super unregulated in the mitigation. I was watching some of your previous guests. You can be a landscape company and grab some dehumidifiers and air movers and walk in, and you can literally cause mold in someone's home. And other than litigation, other than the homeowner identifying why they're sick, it's because of you. And then, of course, the carriers love those people. Those are the ones that will do it the cheapest,
because
the fastest.
Everything can dry within 3 days.
Everything 3-day
Most
drying.
days,
You don't charge for this. You've got to use what Exactimate says in your market. So I have a huge following that I just beat this drum and said, red pill, blue pill. Let's go. And that's kind of my motto.
You ever wonder what would happen if you took both?
I think I've taken both before. Like, what time is it? Like,
That's what we're doing tonight.
Good stuff. Yeah, good stuff, man. Thanks for having me on. I love your
Before we go, I want to tell everybody we are live at the American Policyholder Association Summit annually.
Good.
So we're both members of this. They are one of the sponsors of this show. This is a group of individuals that investigates insurance carrier fraud committed by insurance companies, and is working towards prosecuting against it. So it's a fairly new organization, but some of the things that they've been able to uncover is mind-blowing. There's also a Huggins law firm. Remington wasn't able to make it in today because of something else. We've got Hook Agency. If you guys are roofers and you need a marketing company, Hook Agency is fabulous for roofing companies and helping you gain some leads and things through your own marketing efforts. Building Experts Institute is my company. We've talked about that plenty of times before. I'm going to skip it. Inc. is our newest sponsor. Inc. takes care of endorsements on claim checks for you. I had a video all lined up, but the internet here at the hotel that we're at for the APA Summit is not allowing me to download the entire thing. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play that little video, but we're going to have the Inc. guys on fairly soon. If you guys are dealing with mortgage companies on checks and you're a contractor or a public adjuster and it's annoying the crap out of you like it did to me, I had a whole department for that. You don't want to deal with that noise anymore. Inc. will take care of all of those endorsements for you, including the policyholders' endorsements and make disbursements. And you can log in and you can see everything that's going on and track those. And it's cheap as hell. It's cheaper for them to do it than it would have cost my company in the entire department that I had for that kind of a thing. By 2% of the claim amount. That's how much cheaper it is than what it actually cost me to do it. So take a look into it. Take advantage of that. Claim Titan is a CRM designed specifically for public adjusters. We're going to have Erica on the show at some point very soon too. So thank you so much for watching us on this special Thursday. The very few of you that did, because it's a non-normal day. I have a feeling this episode is going to be very popular. There's a lot of really good snippets that will come out of this one. So thanks again for being on. Appreciate it, Clark. All right. So when I hit this end button, it takes forever to actually